Do you want to kick it off this time, or do you want me to kick it off?
It doesn't matter. I usually kick it off, so I'm happy to do it.
I know. I'm just
That's how we wrote it. But if you want to do it, do you want to give it a go? Remember
no.
what
I'm
happened
not.
last time?
I
You know what happened last
shut
time.
up. And you don't even have.
Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noobs Podcast. You found us. My name is Matt.
And I'm Joe.
We're here to be with you in your adventure to RC airborne proficiency. So buckle in. Let's take off. Plans, inspiration, build materials, or I really want to build. So let's get started. First, we're going to start off with corrections from previous episodes because most of the time I'm just talking and I don't always have the direct information on hand. I had spoken episode 1 about how the founder of Flight Test was Josh Bixler. I was wrong. It's Chad Capper, and I knew that, but anyway, it's Chad Capper. So he's the guy who started it, and he passed that off to Josh, and Josh has been carrying that torch since. In episode 2, we talked about the NASA Prandtl D wing, and the champion in NASA was not Alan Bowers, but Albion Bowers. So similar, they both go by Al, and I don't even know if Alan Bowers is a thing in NASA, but I know Albion is. Anyway, so now that those corrections are made, and I'm sure you're going to chime in, but please reach out to us at the Aviation RC New Podcast at gmail.com. Let us know if we get something wrong. Just tell us, and we'll see what we can do about correcting it. And so now we're on to our segment where we talk about what we've done, if we've flown or done anything in the hobby since we last talked. And we had a little bit of a lull as we've been trying to figure out how we're going to set up our podcast. We reached our hour limit pretty quickly with our original. Real quick, with our original host. So we were kind of trying to figure out how to set up the next group while we were lining up things here and there. So anyway, so now that we're back, we're hoping to kind of get back into a regular schedule again every about 2 weeks. So let's talk about what we flew. Joe, you want to talk about what you flew? Or you want me to start?
Why don't you start it off because we were going to segue into something momentary, like for just a moment at the tail end of mine.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Well, so what did I fly? So it's been Buildery. So I've been doing some building, but it's also the end of February, and I have family who loves to come in at the end, I guess, because they maybe think I need help. I don't know. But either way, they come down, and it's great, but I don't know. Have you ever you haven't been living with your mother, and all of a sudden your mother comes into town and is living with you for a little while, and then there's like the judging about, well, you sure do spend a lot of time with that hobby. And Jesus, maybe your kids, well, that's because she hasn't come to visit you. She lives across town.
She lives just on the other side of town.
But if she was living with you, you'd be hearing. Anyway, so for the last like 3 weeks, I've been hearing, anyway, cramping my style a little bit. I'm really excited that she was here. I'm glad that my kids got to spend a bunch of time with their grandparents. And it was like hitting the easy button for a while. I just had to sacrifice some time at the flying field. Although I did get a couple attempts to get out there since we last talked. I had finished up really quick. There's a guy on the FT Flight Test forums called Vimana89, and I thought I was a building fool. This guy is incredible. I think he's got like a nighttime job that allows him to build while he's at work. And so he builds at work and he comes home and he builds when he's at home. So that guy's crazy. It's awesome. Anyway, so he joined in the Buildery forums, but he designed a plane from an old 1938 Aviation Special magazine called the 38 Aviation Special. Anyway, it's a little plane and it tracks like an arrow. Like I let it go and it took off. I think it's fast. It's agile. It rolls right on its axis, and it is awesome. It was a lot of fun. At least the first flights were. I went out to go fly it again about last weekend, Anyway, we won't talk about that right yet. Well, anyway, so we got it trimmed out, and it was awesome. It was a great time. Couple weekends ago, my my girlfriend's father used to be into what is that? Um, the flying where you're hooked to the cord. You have a plane at the end of a long line, and you basically wind up. You had a motor that was on a gasser. You turn it on, and it would just go, and you just hold on for dear life as it spun in circles, and you controlled the elevator and a little bit of the rudder, and you just held on until that motor ran out of gas.
Yes, it's like
It's called
line control, wire control, or something.
control line. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he used to do that, I think. So he remembered doing it in it, but it's, been 30, 40 years or something. So he's been wanting to get into it as his grandson is about 30. And he's kind of like, oh, this would be kind of fun to get into when he heard that I was into it. He's like, whoa, this is going to be great. So we finally all got a chance to get out. Now he bought an E-Flight with an AS3X stabilization unit in it. And he also bought one of those per my suggestion from them is I'll call it a knockoff version from like the China Banggood store. And they basically have a C-17, so a big cargo plane, except it's only like 18 inches. So it's tiny. And because it's tiny, it needs stabilization. Otherwise, the wind's going to just smack it around and pretty much stick it into the ground. But it's real simple. It's only two channels, throttle, throttle and rudder. Sorry, not thrutter, whatever that is.
Hmm.
No, it's a throttle and rudder. And it basically uses the differential torque to pull the plane and turn, and it also starts to rotate the plane, kind of ailerons left and right. And it does it through differential torque. All it is just literally two motors. That's it. And a little stabilizer. So when the gust of wind kind of picks up a wingtip, it corrects it automatically and tries to level it back out for you. So they're really great little flyers. They fly for like 10 minutes, and if the wind is light, you have a good time.
Hmm.
You get an example of flight, and if you bust it, it's made of EPP, so man, the things are durable.
Now, what's EPP?
Um, oh, sure, make me look it up now. It's like expanded polypropylene foam, I think, and it's basically like a more rubberized foam, whereas like your packing foam tends to be more brittle. Like once it reaches its point, it just kind of snaps, right?
Right.
You have Depron, which is very bendable, but it's very hard to bust. This is like stiffer, but rubberized, so it bounces back. I mean, this stuff you can bend up on itself. I know Lidl has these gliders that my sons have, and they're these crazy like neon colors or something like that. And it's just this molded foam glider, and they're made of the same material. And I mean, seriously, you can slam it straight in a wall at 100 miles an hour, and you just sort of let it be for a minute, and it'll be fine.
Hmm.
It's pretty durable material. Anyway, and it's lightweight. So they had, pardon me, they had these planes out, and so we were kind of flying them around. And of course, we went out on a day. This is one of the first days I had really kind of had available, and we go out there, and it's a public school ground, so I think all the sports kind of just shifted over. So soccer's starting up, baseball's starting up, and basketball's ending, and et cetera, et cetera. So now on Sunday afternoons or Saturday afternoons, there's a small group of like 6U soccer kids practicing like right smack dab in the soccer field that's amidst a pretty large section to the one side of the place the middle school that I fly at. So there's like a soccer field, and next to that is a football field, and on the backside there's a baseball field and a big parking lot in front of all that. So it's one pretty big area. It's where we flew last time. But they're stuck on the right side of this soccer field, which means they are literally smack dab in the middle of all of it. Like if they've been on the left, or maybe in the base of the football field, or maybe if they set up maybe closer to the road, or I don't know. And it's all fenced in, so it would have been fine. Like I would have had a big clear area in the meantime. So we just kind of kept it to our little zone. Fortunately, they were small planes, so we had a good time. And they really kind of got the hang of it. And it turned out his plane was, the little gray C-17 was trimmed out. I guess he'd been pressing the trim button a ton, didn't realize it. So it was constantly trying to turn to the right and just bank into the ground. And I'm like, that shouldn't be happening. That thing stabilizes. Like it should just fly straight and good. So I realized what it was. I fixed it, and then he started flying. He's like, "Wow, this is great." So it was one of those days we had a generally pretty good day. I rebuilt my uh, Dunn Burgess flying wing and gave that a remaiden, and I put some rigging on it, some kite string to kind of stiffen it up, which did a really good job. But I only cut in two of the wing surfaces because typically the way I designed it, it had surfaces on the top level of wings and on the bottom, and they were joined together. I only cut out the bottom, so it didn't have a lot of roll authority, and I think the motor torque was kind of keeping it from turning to the right at all. So I just basically pulled a Zoolander and just kept turning to the left.
Hmm.
Which really wasn't very good. So, and being close enough to those the soccer players, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna put this plane down. So, and then I took out the Silver, um, and flew that around. That's just like a big trainer plane, and it was really easy and fun to fly. So I just flew that around a little bit, and everybody who was out, which ended up being my grandpa or my dad, my mom's boyfriend, my girlfriend's dad. My girlfriend came out. Her son came out. I was there. I'm trying to remember if my mom came out or not. I don't think she did. So it's basically the five of us all just kind of cheering each other on as we were having a good time trying to fly some planes, having moderate success, not exactly crashing anything in particular, but not having terribly great success either. But we had a good time.
Well, that's
So
what it's about.
it is, it is. And then I followed up with the last weekend, literally taking the three planes that I built during Buildroy, which is an origami plane, which was neat. It was basically one cutout piece. You kind of folded in on top of itself and glued it, and it's basically like a V-tail little design. I'm showing Joe right now what it looks like.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so it I couldn't when I turned it on. The servos, I don't know, they were centered, I swear, when I put them in, and now they're doing weird stuff. So I have to fix that before I try it. So I was like, okay, well that sucks. That doesn't work. And then I flew my Hexie, or at least I tried. And if you go to the Foamy DM Hexie page, you can see the results of that, which are it's about 45 seconds of me tanking this thing straight into the ground, three individual direct times. And it basically took a really great arc where it's if you took a plane and put a motor way up high and let it go, it would just kind of curve and arc straight into the ground. And by the time it got to the ground, it'd be almost vertical.
Uh,
That's what this did three different times. So, the way this is set up is this tail is supposed to be cocked at a angle to kind of counter that, and it didn't work. It could also be that the surfaces, the control surfaces, are really tiny.
they
So
are really tiny, and I don't
they're
really see any sort of lifting surface on that. Like I see that it's got wings,
so
but I don't see any kind of an airfoil happening.
so. This is the airfoil. It attacks the angle of attack is the airfoil
Okay.
with a flat plate, and it's basically like a beehive, three hexes of a beehive with two little wings, and it's all flat plate. So the whole plane is kind of getting lift at that angle of attack. So the back is straight, the front is up at an angle of probably about 4 or 5 degrees.
Now you said that you had, and I'm not familiar with this Hexi page, and we don't need to dive too deep into it for those that are familiar with it. But you've got a place where somebody could go and look at that design.
Yeah, if you go into the build, if you look up Foamy DM and Hexi on the flight test forums, you'll see what I built, see the inspiration that started it, and then you'll see the video of my maidening. It won't be long, and you hopefully you'll be laughing because I do. I know I do after I kind of get done being upset at myself for tanking it into the ground three times.
Well,
Oh, it's terrible. Anyway,
well
it's the
here's
nature of it.
here's some good news for us and our listeners. Then, segueing off of the back of that for just a second,
Hmm.
um, we can now say, look in the show notes or the show description, and there'll be a link
Yay!
because
Yeah,
we have more than 500 characters now, so we can include some
yeah.
links down in there.
Yeah,
So
so we'll see about putting some of that stuff in there. Um, yeah, and then I think I was really just trying to fly. I only had like an hour. And then I tried to fly the 38 Special again, and that flew erratically. And maybe I didn't have it balanced right. I didn't check too hard, sadly. And then it got caught in a tree, and then I took a large timber and just launched it straight into it. I poked a bunch of large holes in it, and well, anyway, I'll probably have to rebuild it, but that's okay. Um,
Why do I ever go flying with you?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. Um, because it's not always this dismal, but it just seems like it has been lately.
Because it's fun
Um,
regardless.
that's true. And besides, we have a good time. We usually laugh it up the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Um, I'm also I found a way to I have a mini I'll call it a mini. It's not mini. It's pretty big, but the Spruce Gosling. All the motors have been tested. All the electronics are put together. I have to find my double-sided sticky tape to mount the distribution tower to the wing and kind of get the video system working. And then I'm going to give it a maiden probably in a couple weeks here. So I'm excited about that.
That's one I'm
Uh,
looking forward to hearing results
mhm.
on.
Yeah, me too. And then I was also building as part of a Miyazaki. For those of you who are into anime or watched anime, um, there's a bunch of films that are critically acclaimed. There's some of my favorite films for anime is a filmmaker called Miyazaki, and almost all of his stuff, if you know it, it always involves something having to do something impossible flying through the air. And in one of his movies called Nazca, The Valley of the Wind, there are like two sets of armies. Each of them have these really cool craft. One of them has what they call a bumble crow, or basically it's a heavy transport, and it's basically like this big pod stuck on what looks like almost like dragonfly wings. And I finished up the base model of it. I'm going to try to show Joe, and that's all it is. It's this thing with
Okay.
this. It's basically like an upside down boat with wings on it. I think would might be a good description of it. And it's just a basically big flying wing. So I have yet to find the balance point that makes me happy. According to according to the online things, it's 2 inches from the front of the wing, but we'll see. So I finished that up. So now I'm at the point where I can start putting electronics in it and see what kind of damage I can do to it. And that's basically what I've been doing in the last 3 or 4 weeks. What about you, Joe? I know
Well,
I heard you've been doing something. Well, I
um,
think
only a little bit. So yeah, compared to all that, I look like a chump. Um,
well, I did have the build worry going on. Like that's like the point of that month is to build and fly at least 4 planes.
yeah. So I had actually had to take down the table I was working on to build planes, and just I had the room, but I never set the table back up. So really, I hadn't been doing any building. Um,
It's
which I
okay.
know that the building section's coming up, but I took the old fogey out once since we last sat down for this, and flew in the park down the road from me. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually managed to take my worship leader out to fly, and not super related, but I do sound and tech volunteer for my church campus, and so I get along pretty good with my worship leader. And I said, "Hey, you want to go flying with me? I'm going to go." And he was super into it. Apparently, he has flown some drones with a friend, or quads, or he had something that he had flown a bit with a friend, so it wasn't like his first time flying. But we went out to the park and launched it off, and I flew
Mm-hmm.
it and got it trimmed out, feeling good. In fact, the repairs I mentioned last time, where my elevator surface was aiming down because the wire had straightened out a bit. Some of the winds
That's
in it were straightening out a bit more.
yeah. We
The
we need to get you some sturdier wire for that thing.
Well, I did. I went to Tractor Supply in town and got the yard flags.
Oh,
So,
nice, good.
so I've got those, and I went by Dollar General and picked up
Half thick
the
foam.
floss hooks, like you
Oh yeah,
talk
yeah.
about. Yeah.
Isn't
So
it a dream? So much nicer.
I hadn't built with them yet, but
Oh, okay.
but
Right.
I've seen you use them and looking at them, I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be great when I get back to building.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've got those materials, but I took him out and I was able to correct that issue. I just pulled my pliers out and put a kink in the wire. At one point, I didn't have to do like 290s. I was
Mm-hmm.
able to just kind of kink that
Just
wire
kind
and
of squitch
yep,
it. Yeah.
pull it where I wanted it. And so it's something I'll have to keep an eye on every time I take it out. But we flew it for a bit, had a good
Yeah.
time. He got to fly it. His landings were beautiful. The and I think well, his landings were the kind that you're coming in fast enough that when you touch down and cut the throttle, it like it had been the field we were flying on it, the grass had been cut 4 or 5 days prior, so it was like
Okay.
the wintry I cut grass,
Yeah.
dead grass laying on top. But when he hit the ground,
Nice.
like it just sent up a trail of grass shavings behind the plate as it
Nice.
skidded along like a nice skidding landing because I
Oh,
don't have wheels on it.
yeah,
So it just
yeah.
kind of sledded across the ground for a few feet, and it was pretty to watch.
Nice.
I was like, man, that was a beautiful landing.
You're like,
And
man, I've been at this for like months now, and you just show up.
right, and I
That's
think
awesome, though.
I think the reason that landing was like that is because I come in on my landing approaches and I'm bleeding off as much speed as possible because I don't want to hit with airspeed or I don't want to hit with
Mm-hmm.
ground speed and like have it nose down and as soon as it touches the ground the tail flips up. Like I don't want that
Yeah.
tumbling landing.
What?
So
Come on, they're the best.
no,
They're the
well,
only kinds I know how to make.
yeah, well, I like to land my plane in one piece.
Oh man,
Um,
I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
I got a decent record now that I'm actually flying.
That
So
means you're not flying it right. You're doing something too conservative.
too
I'm
good.
messing with you. Yeah, no. Okay, sure. Bring it up that way. No, that's good though. That's
Anyway,
awesome.
so I think I bring my approaches in too slow for that. Where while he was concerned that he didn't want to break my plane, he comes in faster. So I didn't get the
Sure.
sliding landings, and my landings are good. Like I
The
land them
sliding
soft, but
plume.
yeah. So I actually a little while after that, after he had left, I flew a little more and was trying to get the kind of skidding landing. Uh, More practice needed, but um,
It's okay. But
yep.
you got out to fly, which is good. And I remember you were talking about something. I don't know how you said that some guy would kind of
Yeah,
mention.
don't drop a name just because I didn't
No, no,
ask
I
him.
don't have a name. I don't have a name. But you said you had a guy locally that had said, "I've got a ton of balsa. I'm never going to fly again. Anybody, do you want some of this?"
Yeah,
And
so um, I had put out just trying to see if there was anybody in the area that was doing the hobby and wanted to wanted to listen in to this podcast. So just try to promote the podcast a bit. I put it out there, and an older gentleman hit me up and said, "Hey, yeah, I used to be in the hobby, and I got some balsa that I don't use anymore. It's been in the shop for many, many, many years, and if you wanted it, I'd be happy to donate it for the thing." So I'm not to a point of balsa building yet, but I have some balsa. Um, if when I get to that point, which I
hmm
wouldn't mind doing sometime, but more what I got out of that experience. And he showed up while my worship leader was still flying the plane, but he pulled up. I didn't know he had showed up until I turned around and he was already off at the side of the field, standing there watching. And so I was able to talk to him for a bit, and he was in the with balsa, and so he was with the gas engines. And he was kind of telling
hmm
me some of the fuel concoctions they used, but
Yeah.
yeah, he was just like, dude, that thing is quiet,
Yeah.
compared to what he was used to. I said, yeah, and,
Yeah.
after we landed the plane, because the battery alert went off, and he was like, "What is that?" I said, "Well, that's the low battery alert." So I had my worship leader bring it in, and I said, "Here, hold the plane, feel how light it is." And he was just blown away because even as
hmm
we were talking before we met up, I told him, I said, "Why don't you come out? we're going to be flying, and we can see the differences in when you were in the hobby and
Yeah,
now what the
yeah.
hobby is, or at least this side of the hobby. I kind of let him know, like, dude, we're on the cheap materials end of this spectrum.
Exactly right. I mean, there's still there's still a whole section of model flyers that are by all means building on a balsa or whatever the heck they can put together to throw in the air. Or what is it? The sign materials, I think, was one we talked about, or we're going to. But yeah, and of course, obviously, we work with the foam. But yeah, it was always balsa before. And then those motors, matter of fact, the field I fly at is a giant scale field. And so they have a kind of moratorium for Sunday mornings because there's a couple churches in the area. They're like, we can't have you fly. You're too loud. Nobody can hear us
Yeah.
when we have the windows open. Like, you please don't fly your planes on Sunday morning. So, um, but yeah, I mean, because they used to be. I mean, they're nothing but just screamers, like, "Wah!" And it's like, oh my god, I can't even talk to you. It's terrible.
So I got to talk to him for a little bit. My worship leader left, and he and the older fellow and I hung out there for a while, and we kind of got to talk about his time in the hobby, and yeah, how he was flying. He was on a remote. He was military, so he was on a remote station. I won't say too much about because I didn't ask him if I
No,
could
yeah, that's
bring up anything, but um, yeah, it was telling me about when he was younger and in it, and how him and his military coworkers fired up their own uh, hobby club in on the base they were at, and how they flew and some of the things that went into that, which was interesting to hear. 30 years ago how all that went down.
yeah,
And the differences between now and then. It's the same hobby, it's the same love, but it's just two different beasts entirely. And it's is where I'm sitting here saying, being grateful that, man, for $3 in foam board, I could build a plane. Where if these guys, crashed their plane, they were looking at all kinds of manner of work to
yeah.
repair their planes and fix the balsa. So
Hmm
it
they were
was,
looking at $20 to $50 for the balsa. Who knows how much for the engines? You had the nitro that you had to buy, which was
mm-hmm,
special, and that wasn't cheap either. Never has been. However, never really will be. I don't think. And then of course you have uh, and that's like a whole month of building just to even get a functional airframe, right?
yeah,
A lot of time, a lot of expertise, and then of course you go to fly it the first time, and you just tank it in the ground
yeah,
because
your
you don't know
CG's
how to fly
off.
yet, and you're like, oh no. Well, fortunately, usually that's why you went to these clubs because there'd be guys who would have been in it who could have said, hey, before you even think about, let me get your plane set up right because if you do it like it is, you may not want to come back, and we want you to. So,
Right, right. So anyway, he ended up,
so how'd that go? Yeah.
yeah. It was a great chat. We had good conversations, and the conversations went elsewhere from there. But it was
Hmm
real nice just talking to a fellow that had been in the hobby years ago. We just talk about the differences, and then things that are just going on in our lives. The conversation
Yeah.
went from there, and it was a nice example of the different types of people that this hobby can bring together. Um,
hmm
and you meet somebody, and hey, I'm flying. Hey, I used to fly. Like, we're gonna talk, and from there you talk flight for a little while, and then the next thing you know, you're talking about family history and what's been going on. So it's not
hmm
the conversations and the enjoyment go when you're meeting up with people and chit chat and just go beyond the flight itself.
Yeah.
Um,
It's about the friendships you develop
yeah,
and the unlikely bonds that you would never have otherwise with people.
yeah,
It's just like I
because
was talking to a guy online, a matter of fact. He was talking about, hey, I'm going to be helping out some scouts and stuff. And I'm like, we started getting to talking to a couple different people. And, I just mentioned him. I said, look, if you want to talk about anything, here's my number. I'm not anybody special, but I've done a couple of these things. So, I don't know what age groups you're looking at, but give a call if you want. And so he did, which was really cool. And we talked for a good 15 minutes, and his wife was chiming in the background, and he goes, "You guys are all crazy," but she obviously loved it, and she enjoyed that how much he loved it too. So it was neat to be able to have that kind of connection, just real quick, kind of out of the blue. Didn't expect that phone call, but it was a good time. And I know it's one of those. That's another guy that's on the list of people I hope we can connect with when we get to flight test. I
Yep.
think he lives somewhere in Wisconsin or something like that.
Oh,
Way
is
out
he?
in the No, it's a different guy.
Okay.
Yeah, because I met up with Kilroy '07, and he's the one I built the Silver for, and he also lives out that general way. But this guy was another, totally different section of
Okay.
that state. But anyways, it was neat.
So after he and this, I'm going to tell this part because we're going to segue for a moment into something else that
Mm-hmm.
we can talk about
Good.
briefly. Because I know you're wanting to do an episode on this upcoming topic. But after he left, I flew to Plains some more, and I mean it's a local park, and I fly clear of other people. When other people are walking nearby, I tend to keep the plane up fairly high, and if it's going to be near them in their vicinity, I keep it up high. If I'm once I fly further away, I'll bring it down because I don't have to worry about if the plane drops out of the air that I don't have time to recover before it hits somebody.
Right.
You know, and so I was flying safe, no trouble. Yeah, I'd waved at a couple people. Some people walking around had stopped and looked and ooh ah
Yeah.
and going up. And then I
It's
kind of I
it's
saw a
interesting. That's Sorry. Go ahead.
okay. I saw a cop pull into the park, and he kind of went into the parking lot where my car was parked, and he went out to the very end of the lot, and kind of parked up and was just sitting there facing my direction, and he sat out there for a few minutes. About that time, my low battery alert went off, and I started bringing the plane in, and I was working on setting it down, and he started, coming my direction in the car. He drove his car in my direction, and then ended up parking not too far away from where I was or where my car was, and I had the plane on the ground at that point, and took the wing off, pulled the battery out, and
Mm-hmm.
I said, there's probably not like I don't think I'm doing anything wrong out here. I'm flying
Right.
safe. Maybe he saw the plane from the main road. He saw it up in the air, wanted to come investigate. Yeah,
Right.
so
And
I
see
said,
what's going on. Right.
yeah, I had another battery fully charged, ready to go, but I said, let me just go ahead and pack this up. He may be,
Yeah.
slow rolling me to give me an opportunity to say you need to, move on out, because
Yeah.
they don't
Take the
always.
hint. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I packed, packed for the plane up and was, working on getting it all done. And he kind of slow rolled past me and then made his way out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me thinking that, well, what are the local rules on flying? And I wasn't really able
Mm-hmm.
to. I did a little searching, not a ton. I need to do some more, but I wasn't able to find a whole lot on that. But I need to. But it brings up something that you've been putting out on Facebook a lot, and I know the flight test forums are kind of blowing up
Honestly,
about it, and Josh
eh,
Bixler's involved with it. What's going on FAA or national or
yeah.
federal level?
So at the end of last year, um, so we're now first week of March. Okay. So at the end of December, the FAA put out a notice of proposed rulemaking for remote ID. So requiring that essentially any remote, remotely controlled or unmanned aerial system, they're called UASs, um, that every one of them be remote ID compatible or remote ID capable. And there's a couple provisions in there that are honestly not in they they don't work with the remote control plane hobby. And honestly, for the most part, they don't work with the quadcopter hobby either really well. I suppose if you're doing a race where you got like a kind of a local little zone that you're trying to make a small track with, but for the most part, they have a couple different options. Basically, you put this it's not a transponder, but you basically put a almost like a flight controller that you would have in a quadcopter on your plane, and it basically has a barometer and it has a GPS unit, and it sends that information to your transmitter, and transmitter hooks up to your phone. Your phone sends to the basically to the FAA tracking site where you are, where your plane is, how fast it's going, how high it is, exactly where it is, and then exactly where you are. Also, your information, your FAA registration number, as well as any pilot number you might have specifically for that craft. And you have to register every single craft you have. You have to register yourself. You also need to, oh, you're not allowed to, and this is the one that was killing me, and maybe it'll be the end of the hobby for me should something like that get through and it seems to become a real genuine issue. But basically, they want that transponder unit or that remote ID unit to be tamper proof. And they want the craft that it's in to essentially be, you cannot go in and modify it. So what they want to make sure is that if you get a craft, it has a remote ID. When you turn it on, you link it in and put in your information. And the only way you're going to fly is if you've complied with the FAA regulation to basically allow them to make sure they know exactly where you are, and that law enforcement can see where you are too. However, it also means that anyone in the area will know exactly what you're flying. It also know who you are, and there's nothing in there about keeping any private information about where you live or what your ID number is for the FAA or anything. Nothing is private. So as a pilot, that concerns me because then now, I mean, I've seen, granted, it seems to be a little less prevalent now. But there's, you look around on the internet and you see a bunch of people getting absolutely nutty about, I'm just trying to master how to fly this quadcopter. It's really hard, like really hard without stabilization mode, right? That's what the guys are using to fly the racing drones, right? So if I'm flying a racing drone, all I'm trying to do is just not hurt anybody and learn how to fly it. Meanwhile, like the only places to go do that are soccer fields and, or high school or middle school where we've been. Or a club field, which oftentimes they're usually not really welcoming to quadcopters. So I don't have too many options. Okay, so I want to go do this. I go out to the local soccer field. Meanwhile, like 2 fields down, they're playing lacrosse or something like that. My quadcopter's up in the air. I'm just trying to fly it and not crash it. And some guy's like, "You're filming my daughters, and they're freaking out." It's like, look, I have every right to fly here. I'm not interested in anybody except just not crashing this thing into somebody. I'm just trying to be safe. I'm trying to learn. And yes, there's a camera, but that's only so I have an orientation understanding because this is hard to fly from the ground without a remote viewing, right? Some FPV in there. So anyway, there's a whole thing. So that's part of it. But they say, but we've
And real
taken
quick,
care of you.
not to discount those people that are saying, "Oh, somebody's recording," because
No,
they're
no, it's
like it was a problem. People were
right. It's a
doing that.
concern. It's a concern, right? It's always been a concern.
Hmm.
However, if you've ever looked through a pair of goggles, you'll realize that I'm not peeping in on anybody. First of all, if at that height that my drone is at, your daughter is an ant on the ground. That's literally good luck. Or I'm whizzing past her at 100 miles an hour. Good luck if I could see anything other than, hey, that's a person. Oh crap.
Yeah,
You
which
know.
we shouldn't be flying that close to them in the
No,
first
no,
place.
no. Exactly. Good. And really, we should be keeping, and when we do it, and that's the thing is the modeling aviation industry, I'll call it an industry because it's been around for a long, long time, has has the most impeccable safety record of all flight in America, pretty much. I'm pretty sure that's just dead out true. There's been no lives lost in the hundreds of years in the hundred years it's been around.
Hundreds of years.
Well, it's more than people were flying model aircraft before the Wright brothers flew their craft.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were flying gliders. So they would build a
Okay,
glider out of balsa, and
that
then
makes sense.
And there's a lot of German model. A lot of it took hold in Germany, and then it ported over here. And then, of course, that's where the Wright brothers just brought controlled motored flight.
Right.
But
It was the
there's always
first.
there's always been free flight for at least 10 years before that, or 20 years in the late 1800s.
Right.
So
The big thing about their flight was that they were actually able to meet the specifications of an actual flight,
right.
which was takeoff, gain elevation, and land
And
somewhere at the same
controlled.
elevation that
Their
you
big
initially took
innovation
off
were the
from.
controls.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. It's so it's interesting. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, the whole thing's sort of like, no, no. People were flying before. The flying wasn't the new part. The new part was that they could make sure they didn't crash into the ground. Like, that's the innovation. It's a good innovation.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty solid.
Anyway, so the other way the FAA is saying, hey, look, we'll give you a couple provisions. If you don't have access to the internet and all that kind of stuff, well, then you have to fly line of sight and you have to keep the craft within 400 feet of yourself as like a dome around where you're standing. Okay. I don't know about you, but if you, let's say a football field is 300 feet, right? With the end zones, it's 320. If you get out to the scoreboards and the end zone markers or whatever, the uprights, now you're almost to 400 feet. So imagine trying to fly a very fast old fogey. Like if you could fly the old fogey because it's nice and gentle and you can control it really well, imagine it's going like 3 times faster. You can't even keep it on the darn field. There's no way you'd be able to keep it within 400 feet of yourself. Our runway at our big time field is 800 feet long. I've seen the craft that take off from there. They need the entire runway just to get off the ground, to get
Mm-hmm.
up enough speed. Like that precludes like any sailplanes, any larger scale craft. I'm talking large scale craft as in like 5 footers
Right.
or larger, okay? Or anything with a turbine, any kind of jet, good luck. You need that kind of distance just to get enough speed to get the lift to get off the ground. It's just how they're built. They're built because they need speed for the lift. So that's okay. So now say I don't have cell service, I don't have internet, I don't have Wi-Fi, I can't put my information onto the FAA's website. They're like, fine, you can do it, but you can only you have to stay within 400 feet. And there's another one. They're like, well, what about fixed flying sites? We've got these fields that the AMA members have set up and other places have set up. And they say, well, okay, you can have them. You have 12 months to register them, but at the end of 3 years, no more. You can't renew them.
Hmm.
So in 3 years, they all go away because the technology should be there. They don't have it yet. They don't know what it's going to be, but they know it should be.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that are so not okay. Plus, they're like for a nominal fee of I think $5 per plane, plus a service fee because you're using a third-party connector. I mean, maybe that's awesome if you're Google and you have money to make by it. And I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. It seems one of the other podcasters, RC Roundtable, I think Lee Ray, had put it very succinctly when he said, the aviation industry, the model aviators, are like the little league for the aviation industry. So if you outlawed Little League today, how fast do you think baseball would suck in America? How
Yeah.
fast? Maybe a decade, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
all know this. I worry about it because I try to teach kids about STEM and I use aviation because, I mean, you've done it. You've already looked. It's electricity, right? It's electrical, it's mechanical, it's fluid dynamics, it's aviation, it's chemicals, right? It's material composite stuff. Like you're doing about plus there's structural, all the different kinds of design elements that you might think about. If you want to teach a kid, like you can design this way ahead of time and have success every single time if you take your time with it. That's what people do in real life. If you like this kind of thing, you can take it pretty far and do some pretty cool stuff. And then we point to SpaceX and Virgin and any of the like Grumman, any of the normal aviation industry players that make military craft and things like that. Like there's a whole industry designed for that. Do you think they're going to have, where do you think they're going to start pulling people from in a decade? They're going to pull it from anywhere else because our people are going to be terrible. They'll have no experience. So, anyway, I could go on forever. I want to have a longer episode, but basically, the comment period closed a week ago, and 51,000 comments. And I think they determined there was about 44,000 comments that were unique, need to be reviewed by the FAA. So it's probably going to be a while before any of this stuff actually gets updated, changed, enacted, etc. A little worried, but in the meantime, let's fly. Let's have fun, be safe, and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, and to do that, we need to go get some building stuff, right? We need to figure out how to build it.
Well, real quick, just because part of the process, rapid fire. Matthew, what are you currently building?
Okay, I built the Mave, which is basically the glider from Nazca, the Valley of the Wind.
Okay.
I have the Master Series FT P38. I was going to build it last month, but boy, I didn't have time. Again, family came in, that took a lot of it. Same with the Corsair, but they're on my list, so I want to build them. I've got a Mighty Mini version of the Spitfire, and I want to build that. And I want to build the regular size Spitfire because I want to see the difference. That's going to be a lot of fun. I built the foamy, the foamy hexie. I built the origami plane, and I think that's it. Yeah,
Okay.
that's everything. What about you? What do you want to build?
What do I want to build? Because I hadn't built anything. Made that quick modification on my plane and moved on. I still want to do some straightening out on the Fogey. Reinforce some areas that I'm seeing are potential weaknesses, and then I do still want to build the simple soar because I really think gliding is where I'm going to have a lot of fun.
I'm vigorously nodding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
Looking forward to that.
Good.
Okay.
Well, maybe so in a week from now, to close up Buildworry, I'm going to try to put together, so a week from Sunday, on the 14th, 15th. Is it the 15th? Yeah. Um, I'm going to be putting a link on the FT forums under the Buildworry for 2020. And if you have a plane you want to build along with whoever the heck is going to show up, it may be a cluster, it may be a hot mess, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking and chatting and commiserating about building planes. So if you want, cut out your simple soar and bring it to that, and we'll be building because it's the tail end of Buildworry. All the building was done. Everybody should have wrapped up any flying that they had, any piecemeal flying that they had left. Now that it's a little bit lighter and we have a little bit more time, and then we'll go from there. So at this point, I guess we should just see if we can talk about where to get your stuff so you can start building your own plane, like the FT Simple Soar.
Right, because the only thing that I really know, aside from balsa, which I'm not ready to tackle yet, is foam board.
Mm-hmm.
Straight from Dollar Tree. Now I can get foam board from other areas, but Dollar Tree foam board's like the cheap economic stuff that does a good job. But in our discussions building the show notes, um, you were listing off all these other foams and supplies that I was like, what is going on here? What is all this stuff? So yeah, take us into materials.
Sure thing. Okay, so one of the things that obviously, as a material, you need it to be strong enough to hold up to the forces that the plane sees. So if you're looking at, let's say, a 4-pound plane, the wing has to be able to handle 4 pounds of, well, 4+ pounds of force on it at minimum. And of course, if you're going into a dive and you're trying to pull out, there's extra forces on it. So you need the thing to be strong enough to handle that kind of stuff. But you want it to be light, right? Because the lighter it is, the easier it is to fly. So so there's certain materials that have been traditionally used, and obviously we can talk about the dollar store Adams Ready Board, or AKA Dollar Tree foam board, because you go to the Dollar Tree and it's a certain density, and it's got the paper attached just barely enough to make it easy to peel off, but yet it's still strong enough to give it a good amount of strength. And then of course, if you add, let's say, tape or like a packing tape or like a film or something like that, you can really increase the strength for very little weight, and it's even better, right? Dollar General has like a half thickness, so that's interesting in that it's twice as dense, but it's half as thick. So it weighs the same amount as Dollar Tree foam board, but it's thinner. So it's easier to build smaller planes with it, I guess. It comes as a bigger trifold that's twice as big when it's all folded out as a regular Dollar Tree foam board sheet,
Hmm.
which is 20 by 30. That's the Dollar Tree foam board, 20 by 30 by 3/16 of an inch thick. Dollar General has the trifold stuff, and that is 40 by 30 by 3/32. They are both water soluble, and so if it rains, you're hosed. But the good news is our friends over at Flight Test have come up with and talked to Adam's Ready Board to come up with a basically a plastic impregnated paper, and that ends up creating basically it's a similar weight, so it's not much heavier, and it's a water resistant foam board, so the paper on it doesn't fall to pieces when it gets wet, so they call it maker foam. They used to have it where it looked like it was craft paper that you can get, and you can do this, you can peel off the old paper from the Dollar Tree foam board and put on and glue on craft paper, and then polyurethane that or paint it or whatever you got to do. Literally, the stuff you wrap packages with. It's a little heavier. Anyway, so they took that idea and made original stuff. So it's like a brown Dollar Tree foam board, and that's the original Flight Test waterproof foam. Then they said, "Hey, is there a way we can do this without making it like craft paper, so it doesn't look like a bunch of cardboard?" And they said, "Yeah, we can make it white." And so they did. And now they've got what they call maker foam. So it's just like Dollar Tree foam board. It costs a little bit more. It's the same size, same shape, basically the same weight, but it is water resistant, which means you can make water planes out of it. You can fly it when it starts raining a little bit and you're not going, "Oh no, everything's going to fall to pieces," because the plane is literally turning into mush. So you don't have to worry about it. And then they also talked to Adam's Ready Board and creating this stuff called maker foam, which is twice again as big as the regular Dollar Tree foam board. So it's 40 by 30, but it's 3/8 of an inch thick, but it's the same density.
Yeah.
So it's going to be heavier, but it's also good for giant projects.
Right. And you call it maker foam, but correction, it's the giant maker foam, right?
I'm talking about the giant maker foam right now. That's the
Okay.
40 by 30 by 3/8 of an inch. But it's the product that, and it's sold by A-Main, which is Flight Test distributor for products. So rather than have to maintain the whole store, they said, "Hey, Maine, how about you do that for us and take care of the stuff? And we'll concentrate on building nonsense, fun things that people are inspired by." And they said, "That sounds like a great plan for all of us." Anyway, so they are. Um, if you don't have any of that stuff with you, but you have a local hobby store, ask them if they can get that, because they might be able to get that for almost the same price you can buy it from at the store, and then you don't have to buy a pack of 50. You can only buy a couple sheets as you need for the project, which is what I have done with my local store that we talked to last week, Hayes. Um, anyway, you can also get Elmer's board, right? So that's heavier. The paper's on a lot stiffer. It's stiffer. It's a lot heavier, but it comes in colors. So you'll have the foam is the same color as the paper, which is pretty neat. And it's the same size roughly. It's like 20 by 30 by 3/16. But it's heavier. It's more solid. It's also a lot more sturdy. But again, it's almost 3 times as heavy as Dollar Tree foam board. And that's almost for a lot of the flight test craft with the motors that are just barely sized for the Dollar Tree foam. It makes it almost too difficult to use with flight test plans. You can, and people have, and it works pretty well. You just may have to be a little bit more creative with how you're going to lighten it up.
Or slap a
Um,
bigger motor on
or slap a, that's always a good solution. I know a lot of people take whatever it is and be like, "Well, I'm going to double the size of that motor." And you're like, "Oh,
it.
oh God." And then you can go, and I'll call it traditional. Now we're going to go towards materials that have been used before, right? This is, before Dollar Tree foam board was made into a thing through flight test. I mean, people were using it a little bit, but what people used was they would go to their big box stores and they'd buy insulation foam, either the fan fold foam, which is basically very thin, maybe 3/8 of an inch, and it's like 2 foot by 8 foot panels, and they'd be a bunch of them strung together. And you kind of accordion them out, accordion them out. So it'd be blue. Or you can get the thicker stuff, and that goes in like half-inch, 1-inch, 2-inch panels by 4 by 8 or 2 by. They come in a bunch of different sizes, but usually they're used to cover your house and insulate your house. So it's the Pink Panther foam, but not the stuff you put in your attic that's all fiberglassy, but
Yeah,
in fact
not the rollout foam
no, right. It's
or
the
insulation.
solid panels of polyurethane foam. And they cut with like regular X-Acto knives and things like that, but you're not going to get them to crush. So what you do is you kind of make your box in, but it sands really well and it shapes very well and it holds its shape really well and it's sort of durable. And you can kind of coat it with like a spackle and use that to come up with a really smooth coat. And then with some paint and stuff like that, it really starts looking great. You can also adhere monocoat and another the traditional covering types and make it look very much like a traditional plane. But anyway, you can use that to really mold a plane pretty well. And when people are making nose cones, they'll oftentimes use that and they'll kind of glue a couple of blocks together and then shape that and then glue that to the front of the box of Dollar Tree or
Hmm.
whatever. So that's something worth checking out. It's lightweight, it's cheap, it's abundant, it's easy to get to. So in many senses, it was almost like the original Dollar Tree foam board. Um, then there's of course the chloroplast signs. Like these are the for sale signs you see in people's yards. Or I think I got a giant one from the ball field, and people would make their advertisements on the little league ball fields, right, that you have in your local town, and they hang on the back fence, with the advertisements from the local businesses. And eventually they get rid of them. Every season they kind of pull them out and see if they can put up new ones. If they're getting rid of them and you happen to be there, just go grab it. It might be brittle, or you can go to your local big box store and get it. They're usually 3/16 of an inch thick or so. They're about 2 by 4. They're heavier, right? But they're almost nearly indestructible. So you basically make a big giant flying wing and use it in your combat, and chances are your plane is not going to go down. If you build it smart and kind of impregnate your propeller in the middle somewhere so that you really can't get to it to destroy it. Um, anyway, but chloroplast signs have been used for spads and a bunch of other stuff. It's lightweight, it's durable, it's waterproof effectively because it's plastic. You have to use a couple different glues, but a lot of people have used it with great success for a long time.
Well, how do you
Um,
go about um, doing the folds in that if it's that
you cut
thick
out
and
right because it's ribbed, right? So it's basically
oh
these square cells. So you just slice off one of the cell walls,
oh
you
it's
just
that
fold that up.
stuff.
Yeah, it's that stuff. So
Okay.
it's basically got a top layer and a bottom layer and a bunch of vertical ridges that run the length of the product. And
Right,
so
right.
based
And
on
it's
how you orient those ridges and where you cut them, I mean you can, it's almost like Dollar Tree foam except it's got vertical plastic stuff you have to get through. So it's a little bit harder to cut, but with a little bit of patience, you will probably be rewarded with a plane you'll have for a long time. So if you have a design you like, you can't hurt to try making it out of that.
hmm.
Honestly, at flight tests, some of the more successful combat planes were those. But everybody would pigpile on the chloroplast plane because, that's not fair.
But there's no rule saying I can't.
No, exactly right. Let's see. So that covers all those, and of course we can go to the traditional, like you were talking about, is balsa. I mean, that's been around since forever. It's the one of the least dense woods there are. It has a high strength ratio. You can buy it in different densities. You can sand it and shape it just like any other wood product. Although the less dense it is, the more prone it is to being damaged by knocking it with a metal tool or something. It'll dent easy. But there's ways to fix that. With wood, you use a little bit of hot water or some steam, and it'll basically, I'll call it, reimpregnate the cell with water, and it'll expand, and then it'll basically pop out the dent.
Hmm.
Same with expanded polystyrene, which is what a lot of traditional, like when you bought the plane from the Walmart or whatever that uses a chuck glider, that stuff it's a packing foam that you see in all your packages. The neat thing is if it crushes, you take boiling water and just basically run it over that spot, and the heat re-expands that foam. And then you can basically sand it smooth again, and now you have a perfectly fine looking plane again.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. So balsa is tradition. And basically what you do is you cut the sections and you cut a spar and you shape the nose and you cut a thin piece in the taper thin piece in the back of a wing and you create a wing and then you build up the sections of your fuselage and run sticks from nose to tail. And then once you're done, you basically have a frame, just like like the original planes. If you look at some of the plans of the any plane, especially the older ones, and then what they would do is they would cover it with silk or like a thin, very thin canvas, and then they would dope it and basically fill up any holes with what they called a dope. It was basically like a glue, and then they would fill that in, and then they would sand it smooth, and they'd fill it in again and try to keep it as light as possible. And honestly, the modelers did exactly that. They just used a finer silk or a thinner canvas because they didn't need the kind of strength you need in a real plane. And then, but they would dope it up and they would get it as thin as possible, and then that's what they would use. Eventually, in the 70s and 80s, they came up with a plastic products. They were basically like shrink wrap, so cellophane and products that are similar. And what they would do is they'd have them have either spray glue, something like Super 77 nowadays, or they basically heat activated glue, and they would spray that. It would always have one side that'd be ready to go, and you basically put it on top and you run over it with an iron at a certain temperature, and then that iron would activate the glue and it would start to shrink the stuff, the cellophane or whatever it is, the plastic. And then basically you're shrink wrapping, you're custom shrink wrapping your plane in a colored plastic. And of course, that's what you usually see in the traditional models, and they're beautiful looking.
And I was looking at some videos on putting the the wrap on balsa planes because once the gentleman had messaged me and mentioned that, and I said, well, that'd be kind of cool anyway to eventually get into. Um, I was looking into it. There's a lot of different aspects that go into that side of it. And by that, without getting too deep in, I thought it was interesting to learn that when you go to like you heat iron the plastic film to your frame,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go to hot gun blow or hot air blow it to cause it all heat shrink up. I didn't know this, but you you have to be mindful of the temperature you use
Mm-hmm.
when you're shrinking that because apparently once you've heated it and it has shrunk, if you happen to stretch it out somehow again or something happens, you can't just use the same heat because it won't do anything. You've got to go hotter for it to then shrink further if you happen to like stretch an area out. So you don't
Yeah.
want to like blast it with your highest heat possible.
Right,
Like
and of course, too much, and it creates a weak point. And then as it's shrinking, it pulls open a hole.
hmm
Which, by the way, you want to know how I know?
did you try it?
Yeah. So I took the somebody said that they like, I used the Dollar Tree cellophane. So that like around this time of year, it's closing in on Easter. They sell the cellophane wraps to put around the Easter baskets, and you basically shrink wrap the thing, right?
Okay.
You use a blow dryer and you shrink it. Well, you can take that same stuff, and if you make a frame out of Dollar Tree foam, you can coat that with Super 77 or some glue, and then you use an iron or a blow dryer or a heat gun if you're careful. And I wasn't always entirely careful, but anyway, I was trying it out. But it works the same way, just almost exactly the same. It may not be as forgiving as some of the products that are traditionally used, right?
Right,
But
it's
it's
designed for
essentially
it.
exactly right. Yeah, they're made for doing what we do with it. So I use that product, and you can do it over top of existing foam board. Like you make your wing, and then you put that on top, and you basically glue it down, and then you heat it up, and it'll shrink and conform, and it'll look beautiful. I've seen some guys do some amazing work. I mean, you got to be careful. You have to make sure to get all the wrinkles out, and you're basically shrinking it as it goes around a curve. You want to shrink it so it hugs that curve. And if it's in a valley, you probably should have it like connected at those valley points in some sort of groove. That
Right.
way it doesn't pull away. But anyway, that's a whole fine art. Like you said, we just want to touch on it. But you can use that Dollar Tree cellophane to do the same kind of thing. It actually works pretty well. And if you're careful, I'm sure you can really get the knack of it. So that's another way to cover planes and have some additional strength. And I know I made one out of foam board. It's micro. It's like, 16 inches. And it was a glider, so I wanted it as light as possible. I think it ended up being 50 grams total. But I used a cellophane wrap. So I made the traditional frame with the sticks, but I used sticks of foam board. And I glued it up and I wrapped it in the cellophane and I just gently went through. And now it's not perfect, but it worked better than I thought it was going to. And a lot of other people are like, oh, that's pretty good. Like, I want to give that a try too. So, well, I'm
Well,
not the one who came up with it, but go for it, man. Tell me how it goes.
Easter's coming up, so
Yeah, time to go out and get a couple.
yeah, I might have to keep an eye out for that. Go for a resupply mission or something.
Yeah, exactly. It can't. What? It's $1, right? If you try it out and it sucks, and you're like, that was stupid, then
You're out of
okay,
buck.
you're out a buck. You
You're
tried
out.
it,
You're out half a
and
Coca Cola.
yeah, you ought to have a Coca-Cola, and you learned something, right? It can't happen every day. Okay, so then I guess the last part that kind of, so now you have these materials, right? But you're like, well, but I want plans. Like, where am I going to get these things? Like, well, you can draw them up, but most people, especially when you start, like, I don't know where to begin, right? Obviously, we talk up Flight Test a lot because that's where you and I pretty much started. That's where I got you started, and that's where I really got into the hobby. So go to flighttest.com, and they have a whole section on articles, and any one of their kits has a link to their plans. And if you want to see more, chances are if they don't have a plan set, somebody on the forums already built it, or already made one, and you can see how well it flew. And because almost everybody there tries to post a video of it flying, so you can see if it worked. Um, or in my case, you just see pictures of it crashing hard into the ground into a million pieces. But that's
And
uh,
a nice thing about that is, as far as I know, all those plans are free.
yeah, all of their plans they'll release. They have PDFs for free, so you download, and they're set up to be typically they have full size sets, and then they also have them tiled. But Adobe Acrobat is pretty cool in the sense that you can take any full size plan and hit the poster button when you're doing the print options, and it will break whatever it is into whatever size of sheet you have that you tell it you have, and it'll break that full size sheet and place it on, like, 8, 11 by 17 sheets if that's what you use, right? It'll break that plan up, and then you basically print it out, and then you can tape them all together, and then now you've got your plan set
Right.
at
And
home.
I was actually going to ask you about that once we got through this because I'm fortunate enough that you're fortunate enough to be in a job that you just run off a massive plotter I think you called it,
Yeah,
but you just print the whole plan to scale
yeah,
and you roll it up and you said I pick it up from the
yeah,
couple plans that I have and I've seen your place. You got tons of those plans rolled
yeah.
up
It's
waiting,
because
but
I
uh,
want to build too much.
you know if I get inspiration or just for listeners who don't have access to a full size plotter, um, could potentially go to a place like Staples
Yep,
to run plans off. That gets pricey. Uh,
it can, but it's not terrible. Um, but it can be. But that's one of the places you can go.
so, are there any other options other than having access to a plotter that size, going to an office copy shop to
Hmm.
print that stuff off, or to do the tiles? Which I'm glad you mentioned tiles because I asked if there was a way to do that. Are those the only
Hmm.
three options, or are there any other? Um,
Well, you can do what you did. Do you remember what you did? Just take a
oh,
bunch of foam, make some
just
measurements, and start
just say
cutting.
screw it, pencil or napkin math it up and go.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, that's what a lot of guys do. Like, there's a whole guy. All he does is he has a picture of his plan, and he's written the dimensions on the sides and whatever. And you can take that and do those same measurements on your sheet, and cut it out just like he did, and you'll have a flying wing. There's
Hmm.
one, it's a no waste 4 sheet or 2 sheet or 1 sheet flying wing. It's one of the articles that they have on the forum, or on the article section of the flight test page. But you can also look it up in the forums. By the way, the forums are at forum.flighttest.com, and that's flight test FLITETEST. Just I don't know. Maybe there was already somebody with the word flight spelled like normal, you know, flying a plane flight. Um, anyway, so yeah, those places, those you'll get your plans for free, pretty
Okay.
much. Um, RC Groups is another website, and that's another one dedicated towards model aviation, and it is set up where it's similar to like it's like what the balsa builders used to use to kind of put their plans together and put their heads together when they had ideas and they wanted to see if somebody else either had the same idea or they just wanted to show like look at the cool stuff I'm doing. I don't know what. It's just share and be part of a community that is interested in what we do, right? So RC Groups has a whole myriad of stuff. Some of them are links to paid stuff. Some of them are free. Some of them are just hand drawn pictures, which you'll never be able to. You can eyeball it. I mean, you could see that that concept works and try to do your own, and a lot of the times. But check it out. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff on there. I mean, it's an overabundance of things. You will definitely find inspiration there. That's for sure. You'll also find a community of people who may tell you to Google it, but they'll be welcome that you're there. You know, they'll be glad to see another face who's interested in modeling. Um, and then you can go on to, there's a couple sites that I've used to basically, they're just collecting old balsa kit plans, and anybody who's got an old plan set for any model aviation. That's called aerofred.com. It's AEROFRED.com. So Aerofred, or outerzone.co.uk. Those two sites have like all the traditional bottles. So if you built a balsa kit or bought one, it would come with a full size plan set, which you're supposed to roll out on your board, which is usually like a ceiling tile or something like, or maybe an extra polyurethane thing. And then you put wax paper down over top of your plans or a glass sheet some people use. And then they start literally gluing their balsa right on top of all that, over top of the plans. So Aerofred and Outer Zone have people have taken their old plans of that or asked the company, hey, and they scan those in a full size scanner like I might have at work. And then they post them to those sites and you can download them. All you got to do is be a member. You basically sign up, let them know who you are and how they can send you emails letting them know when stuff is there or whatever it is. I think they're all free on both those sites. I don't think I've had to pay for one.
Hmm.
They asked to, and there's a couple other sites like that. I might be missing a couple, but they're really good. Honestly, that's how I've got the Hexi plans. The Hexi plans are a little plain. I literally directly translated this to foam board. I did a little bit of creative stuff with maybe the spar and the little front canopy that's busted because I nosed it in so many times. But that's an example of a conversion. I
Okay. So the hexaplane was not a foamy DM original,
No, it's a balsa model that I converted. I think it was all 16th inch thin balsa sheet.
but you do have some foamy DM original builds out on the
Oh,
forums, I think.
oh man, I've got 27 of them, I think.
26.
And the
Jeez.
reason why I know is because I told the FAA, hey, what you're doing is going to effectively destroy the hobby that I love because it's not. Like, this is what I do. And I told them I have 27 of my own plans. Some of them are conversions from Balsa, but I would say the majority, 20 of them or more are my own. I came up with the ideas or they were inspired by people's pictures that they drew because they thought this plane looked cool. Some of them are maybe like a little foam. I think one of them was like Logan picked up a foam plane that was like a commercial, like pull it back and let it zip across the yard, kind of deal. I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if it were bigger? He's like,
Right.
yeah. I'm like, well, let's see if I can do that, right, with foam. But most of it is, as much just inspiration from other stuff. We'll get into inspirations in a second. Let me tell you about a couple other quick places you can go see. rcfoam.com, they have a bunch of plans. rcplans.com, rc-plans.com. I think these are more like pay sites, but I mean, it's really nominal. It's like $3 or $4. So basically, they're just saying, hey, can you help me support my website so that I can keep these available to people?
Right.
Mikey's RC had a bunch of really neat, fun, goofy planes. He just built neat things out of foam board and said, "You could do it too. Let's get flying." Foam Concept Jets is another one where, for a pretty nominal fee, I think it's like $20 for a year. You basically have access to everything on the site. You can download all of the plans that they have available, and they're all like these slot and prop jets for the most part. And so they're basically usually a single plane of the plan form with a couple rudders and tails and stuff, and then they have a slot in the middle at the end of the fuse, and then that's where you put your motor, and then there's the propeller sits in the middle and a little slot you cut out where you put it in.
Hmm.
That's it. I mean, it's pretty simple, but they're effective. The profile looks like the real thing. They look like a Tomcat or you know, I don't know what jets you dig, but if you want a Vampire or a like de Havilland Vampire or maybe a Spitfire or a Mustang, because everybody seems to love those. They're really neat planes. They fly really well, and they've got like basically profile planes that are easy to put together. The planes are easy to cut out. It's $20, and that may be a lot. So maybe that's where you go later. Um, and then so those are not all of them, but those are the ones that I've been to and seen. But I mean, heck, I even get inspiration from what is the guy? The papercraft people. So people are making realistic models of things out of paper.
Oh, like the guy that did I think somebody did a fully like to scale or scaled
Yeah.
down but accurate detailed uh one of the Boeings. I think one of the
Yes.
Boeing's airliners
Yeah.
that
That
was
that
like
made.
super functional, like with the
Mhm.
moving flaps and everything, and it was
Yeah.
just what, out of paper.
Yeah. It was out of basically Manila folder material, I
That
think is
was
what it
it.
was. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I saw that
somebody.
video a few years ago. I was like, dang.
Yeah, yeah, and they're card. They basically make it out of card stock, different types, and they'll say, "Well, what weight paper were you using to make this?" Anyway, so those guys, some of them, like there's a guy on called fiddlersgreen.net, I think, um, and he basically has these little like 2-sheet wonders. You take and print on normal weight paper, or a little bit like thicker printer paper, and what he'll do is then you fold it up like he's got the instructions and tabs, and you can fly those. You can literally chuck them across your office, and they'll go all the way, from one end to the other. Like they're functional flying models. They might be free flight, but they're. But the neat thing is they're taking that paper and you can fold it and round it and all that stuff. So I've actually taken one of those and made them bigger, and I tweaked it a bunch here and there to make it work with the foam and the thicknesses and how I know it operates. But that's the Kingfisher that I put together is based a lot of the curves and how it forms is based off of his thing. I wanted to see how well it translates, and
Hmm.
it's pretty awesome. It translates pretty well. So I mean, you can go out and see what else is out there. Those people putting together these complex 3D origami paper things, like you can. I mean, what do you think a 3D model is? So when people build the 3D model and flatten it and then make a flight test plan out of it, it's almost the same thing as what these papercraft people are doing. So
That's
you can
true.
find inspirations there. Matter of fact, if you look at the flight test flying pig episode, that's exactly what they did. They literally took one of those papercraft pigs, made it out of foam board, and then they put wings on it and flew it. So, so go check a look at that if you see it. It's a fun episode. All right, so where do you get your inspiration, right? If you're gonna, I want to build stuff. Where do I go to find what I want to build, right? What about you? Where do you go if you're thinking about building a plane?
I mean, I've only built a couple, so I got it from you. Um,
Well, no, you look, I had nothing to do with your glider that you
no,
built.
no, you didn't.
You built that on a whim and a wing and a prayer.
And I,
It was
hindsight,
great.
I wish I had taken one more evening to get, but I had to get it in
That's
the
okay.
air. I was taking my sister flying. There was just no more time.
Yeah,
But I think that would have been awesome if I had gotten the center of gravity right. But um,
okay, I
on
agree.
like there was no real inspiration for that one other than this is what I want to do.
Right, and you saw something
And
similar that you're like, this should work.
yeah, and that's inspiration enough sometimes. Like
Hmm.
I just want a glider that's my quote unquote design,
Right.
and you just honestly you troll the forums. You
Yep.
know, you go through, look at what other people are doing, you see their builds, you're like, oh man, I could, okay, that's a wing structure I could use. That's a simple enough
Hmm.
thing to work with, and I can put my own twist on it. My twist being that the wing was two full sheets of foam. Um, but it was the inspiration was just I want a glider. Now I knew that I wanted to try to do the polyhedral setup, and just couldn't. Um, and I guess you could say, where do you get inspiration for some of the uh, where do you get inspiration for how you're going to build it? Because there was the bar and sheath mechanism that I was planning because I wanted really big wings. Where do you? And that was just when you sit down and think about a problem long enough, you think about other real world solutions and how stuff can work. But that's where I pulled mine from. Was just oh
Yeah. Somebody was
oh
listening when you did that, huh?
yeah, I
Look at
see you've
that.
incorporated that slot
Uh-huh.
sheath mechanism. Now
So
was that
what I just showed Joe was the Bumble Crow or the Tomekian heavy transport. I used what when I saw what he did with the his glider with the basically four sheets of stacked foam as the core that sat in the center of a box at the center of the wings. I kind of used that to basically create a separable wing. So two that kind of nested in each other in the fuse, but I could take the wings off because this Tomekian transport is nothing but wing.
so?
So thank you, Joe.
For yeah, I was going to ask you because you're building that thing. Was that in some was that wing mount system in some plan you saw somewhere, or was that strictly inspired from our conference? Wow, I am honored
Hmm.
and
Well,
wow.
I originally thought like I've got a box bar. I'll just cut it in half. I'm like, but they need to like nest it. I had a panel on either side in the main wing that's stuck in the fuse, like it's glued in,
Mm-hmm.
and so that stopped the wing from twisting. But I'm like, but
Right.
they need to friction fit better because it wasn't super tight. There's a couple reasons for that, but and I'm like, you know what I could do would be easy. Would just be like sandwich a couple pieces of foam and stick it in the center of that box and just stick them together. And then basically I just run the wires in from each end in the aileron section. Just run them in and they basically, and then I just sandwich it in and we're good. We'll
Look at
see if
that
it
work.
works. I mean, we'll see if it stays solid enough. It
Yeah,
should.
I mean the thing that was going to happen with the glider that I didn't ever really get to discuss was my plan to keep the wings from pulling out. Now there should be a lot of outward uh, pull on those wings, but to keep that from happening was I was going to take the barbecue skewers and run it through the top of the wing, through the spar and its
Hmm.
system, and then through the bottom, so that like put a
So,
glue ball on top
yeah.
of that they keep
So they wouldn't go through. Yeah.
the skewer to keep it from falling all the way through, and then maybe have something to kind of lock it in underneath. But it was basically be one or two barbecue skewers just going
Hmm.
through as bolts
Yep.
effectively.
Yep.
But look at that. We're pulling inspiration off of each other here.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, when you have a good idea.
Hey,
Um, Nice. So go you.
Well, thank
So
you. That means a lot, actually.
well, you should take it because it was awesome. I was like, that is a good solution. I'm using that. So we'll see. I may curse you later when the wings like come flying off, and
Hey, I told you the step that we didn't get to talk about last time.
yeah, I know. That's okay. All right. So the other inspirations, right? One of the series of builds that I've done, which are all custom builds, and they are off of inspired fantasy aircraft. So go find people who drew pictures. They usually have a top view and a side view and a three quarters. Like, whoa, this stuff is awesome. Well, use those and just kind of figure out how you might be able to, bend your foam to meet those general shapes profile wise and plan for them. And while it's flying, honestly, it's usually going so small and so fast that when it's way up there, you're not going to notice. It's going to look just like that really cool fantasy craft. And a lot of planes that you find are just profile planes. They're literally the profile and it's teed in with the plan form. So no matter where you're looking at it, it looks like the plane you love. They're simple and easy. Let's see, YouTube. You go on YouTube and look up like what other people are doing. Like you said, troll the forums, troll YouTube, see what's going on. If it's a real life plane, look up 3D view and then the name of that plane, and I'm guarantee you that there are so many history buffs that if it isn't an RC aircraft already, then you can find it. You can find it. They've already done it. They'll give you a 3D view. And then you can take that and you basically kind of draw it up and lay it out on a piece of paper, measure it out. You can scale it up. I mean, you can do it all by hand. I do mine with CAD because I have it accessible. There's a lot of free CAD things, and oftentimes what I'll do is I'll literally drop the plan view in the background. I think I put together a video of this. Put the plan view in the background, the picture, the JPEG or whatever,
As like
and
a
then
background image.
as a background image, and I'll draw like a circle that's the size of the propeller I suspect I'll need to make the plane. Like I know I want about a 4 foot wingspan or something like that. Well, usually that runs on a 10 foot or 10 foot, 10-inch propeller. I know, like, oh my God, 10-inch propeller, right? So, okay, well, then I make the circle and then I resize that image to basically where the propeller of the craft, the original one, kind of matches the 10-inch, and then I start drawing out all the outlines and folding out the shapes. And some people use that same kind of deal to use what is it, the Google SketchUp. They'll basically make 3D models of it that way. And then there's a plugin that you can add, and it's called Flatten. It takes all the polygons you made and you start at a face and you go up, 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 and it literally flattens it out.
Folds it out and
It folds it
lays it
out.
down.
And then so what you do is then you get a picture of that and you can literally draw. You can either just print it and cut it, or like for me, I put it in the background of the CAD and I scale it to make sure it's right. Anyway, and I draw curves rather than straight lines and a bunch of little polys and whatever. Because then I can curve it and then it looks fancier. But truly, but it's really just the same thing as taking that 3D view that you drew and you made a model of, and then you just flatten it, and then you reverse that process with the foam. You cut out the foam and then you unflatten it into the 3D shape.
There you go.
Really. And that's what I have. So with the inspirations and the plan sets that you can look at and get inspiration from, or you can have your buddy who comes up with a really good idea and you just bite off of that and tell them that was awesome. You could do that like I do. Um, so you can do that. And then, go to your big box store, go to Dollar General, Dollar Tree. Maybe you'll find a new material yourself. People have traditionally used Depron, but I think nowadays they don't even make it, so it's very hard to come by. But if you can get sheets of EPP foam, heck yeah, go to it. Most people who build wings, like flying wings, they'll make it out of Depron, literally like a 6 mil sheet, which is effectively the same thickness as Dollar Tree foam. And then what they'll do is they'll use a Dollar Tree, the flight test Versa wing or something. They'll make that out of Depron or APP foam sheets, and they'll cover it with a laminate, almost like you would when you were at school and you laminate a piece of paper. Use that
Right.
same stuff basically, and then they would fly the dickens out of that thing. They make it scream like 100 miles an hour. That's ridiculous. And of course, it's EPP foam. It's indestructible. I mean, literally, just slam that thing into a wall at 100 miles an hour. It kind of crumples for a second, lands on the ground. You pick it up and go, okay. And as long as the propeller didn't bust, you're good. And if it's a flying wing, the propeller's typically in the back, so you're good.
And a thing on props, real quick,
Mm.
and we're getting kind of towards the end here, but
Yeah, yeah.
um, so I had bought a big pack of props. It was like 36 props that I
Mm-hmm.
picked up for less than $1 each. But I bought that many because I was concerned with the rate that I was breaking props. Um, and what I figured out is, and you kind of hinted at it in our conversations before, but with the quality of the material, so the quality of what the prop was, because now I hadn't popped a prop since. Um, and I've got all these props
I think
laying
it's because you're
around.
prepared for it. I think that's really all it is.
Yeah, well, these props have a bit more give to them. They're not as
They're more
rigid
flexible. Yeah.
and brittle. They're just, yeah, they've got some give to them. Which, all the way back in episode 1, do you remember I tanked it and tanked
Yeah.
the Delta, and I got the wobble prop.
Oh boy.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was the kind of prop that I'm using now.
Okay.
So if I have a problem with this, I'm gonna have a wobbler, but as
Yeah.
opposed to a broken prop. But
Just make sure you use those. They come with little black circles. And what you basically do is they bore out the inside of the prop a little bit bigger than the shaft you typically need. And those little circles slip into the back and they will fit snug over whatever shaft you have. That way there's no wobble. That's what you're
well,
supposed to do. Now, I'm not saying,
that's not
I'm not going
something
to tell
that.
you what I've done.
Well, the issue there is that might be what's supposed to happen.
Hmm.
And I don't know if we ever covered it, but the motor that I got is actually, I think, a quad motor.
Yeah.
And
Flight,
so,
Flight Test likes to use those as their base. They're
right,
very
and
efficient motors, is what they are.
well, there is a good motor. The problem is I
Hmm.
can't get a prop saver for it because its
No,
shaft is
right.
the wrong size for prop savers. And the props that I got don't just slide over the prop, or sorry,
Right.
they don't just slide over the shaft. Every one of those
You have
props,
to
I
bore them
actually have to
out.
take
Oh.
yeah, I got to bore them out further. So those rings are nothing for me. But it's good to know that that's what they're for.
That's ideally what they're for. So if you have a ring that will fit over that, you can bore it out and not worry as much as long as you're pretty close to the center. When you put the ring back in and fit it over I think it's a 5 mil shaft is what's on most of their motors. It'll be tight. So that's something. But I run into the same problem. Some of those props are designed for 3.17 millimeter shafts, and those also have prop savers. So you know, the prop savers are these little contraptions where it's basically a collar with two screws that kind of stick out. And you put the prop on top, and it's basically got like a little nub that kind of fits into the back of the prop, so it seats properly. So it seats perpendicular with the shaft.
Hmm.
And then you take an O-ring, just a small gasket basically, and wrap that around the top from one nut over the prop to the other nut. And it's thick rubber, so it doesn't go anywhere. But in a crash, the prop's going to hit the ground and it's going to torque or twist right off the shaft or take the shaft with it in the case of the first time I flew one of my planes. Um, anyway, it's the first time I'd had a
Oh,
shaft break.
well, was that the video where your whole prop just went wee, or was
No,
that
no, that's different. That was just a nut.
okay?
A nut came loose and the prop went going. No, that was actually the bird of time. The first time I flew it at flight test, and it went and then it cartwheeled And when it cartwheeled, that prop was not a folding prop like I have now. It was just a regular straight prop. And when it hit the
Oh,
ground, it just took that, it just took that shaft right clean off. Just
goodness.
cracked it. And I'm like, wow, that's the first time I've ever seen that. Usually the prop goes first. I'm like, oh, darn it.
Now I'm out of motor.
No, I'm out of motor. I don't have another one here. Oh, geez, I guess I'm done with this project for now. So, which sucked, but it's okay. It ended up working out better in the long run. Anyway, so the prop savers are great because when it hits the ground, the O-ring flexes and the motor and the propeller just basically turns and gives.
And
But
rolls
it
off.
and either rolls off the shaft front because it's only kind of sitting at the front end of it. And then so your motor shaft doesn't break, your prop doesn't break, and the O-ring stretches and sometimes they break, so you keep a couple extra on hand. Other than that, I mean, those are like 5-cent pieces if you buy enough of them. Um, and those are great. I mean, they will keep you using, and then you don't have to have the propeller match exactly the shaft size because it's really kind of sitting just on the front edge of that.
Hmm.
So they're good, but you can't, like you said, you can't use them on the 5 millimeter shaft that they give you with the quadcopter motor that you have. So if you go to Amazon and you buy the really cheap no name brand orange motor, which is the cheap Chinese knockoff brand, I call it that, but I don't know who the heck makes it. I'm certain it's China, but fact is it's about the same. So it's a 2212 1000 kV motor is the same as the C-Pack. If you get that one, you can get it that comes with a prop saver and you'll be good to go. And you'll have a little bit bigger of a motor, so when you build a bigger plane or you're like, this B-Pack isn't quite enough, you'll be good.
Cool.
Um, so I think that's about all I had, at least for materials, but that should get you where to get inspired, where to go find your other build materials, where to find build materials in your local town, and how to get plans to start with and how to get them so that you can use them. So I guess the next question is, what are we going to work on next week, the next couple weeks? You have any plans? Have any ideas?
Uh, well, per our conversation earlier, I currently have everything that was in my attic in my man cave right now, so I don't really have a place to deploy my table to build. So
Well,
not so
put the
much
stuff
plane
back in the
building.
attic.
I yeah, I know. Like I gotta get it back up there. There was a reason it came down. It's down. I gotta get it
I
back up
know.
there.
Yeah.
So
I'm being a smart.
maybe
You know
not.
that's the pot calling the kettle black, right?
Yeah, yeah. Try. So yeah, like I want to work on the fogey some more. Just kind of make some improvements to what I've already got. But I do still want to tackle the FT Soarer, but not directly plane building related, but a project that I want to take on that will uh, hopefully help with it
Mm-hmm.
is I don't always want to be set up on this table in here. It's nice because I don't have to pack my stuff up every time,
Yeah.
but I'd like to be able to stand a bit more when I'm working because a lot of times I'm in my chair here. So I
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
want to in my garage. They've got those Murphy beds that like fold up into other types of furniture. I
Yeah.
need my bed. I fold it out. I don't need my bed. I stand it up on end, and now it's a
Mm-hmm.
bookcase. I want to do something like that in my garage for a drop down. I've seen some videos of them, different
Mm-hmm.
guys doing them on YouTube, but I want to have something like that in the garage. That'll
Yeah.
be on my bay side, so that when I'm wanting to build a plane, I just don't have
Pull
my
your.
bay in the garage. I leave my car out, and my wife can still
Mm-hmm.
park hers. But when I don't need the bench, I can fold it up and lock it in, and
Kind of keep it away. Yeah.
yeah, it'll double as just a project work surface for other things. So if I want to, work on a carburetor, I'm not stuffed in this little side room that's on the garage that's full of stuff and unorganized and right next to my hot water heater. I've got some room to work.
You know
Yes.
what? You know what's a really fast way to clear out that garage?
What's that?
Have your hot water heater break.
You
I hope it
right?
doesn't happen. I've had mine happen like that. I went, oh, I better clear everything out right now. Oh
Uh
no.
huh. I was
I hope it doesn't happen.
I forget where I was going one day. I think it might have been to work. I had looked, I had been looking in there. When I bought the house, they had like this oil pan under some of the piping that went to the hot water heater. It is unrelated to anything flight, but it, I had noticed this. I always wonder, why is that pan there? They must have had a leak there at one time, and it was one of those whole house filters that was attached in line, and I never used the filter. I never changed cartridges. In fact, I think when I actually took that out of the system, there wasn't even a cartridge in it. Um, anyway, so it started it years later. So about a year ago, not even, it started leaking.
Hmm.
Just a little drip, doop doop doop, and it filled that pan up. And I
Yep.
was watching, I was like, it's starting to overflow out of the pan. Like it's not evaporating off fast enough now, and it wasn't hot water because it was the cold water supply to the hot water.
Okay.
But it started dripping, and then it got a little worse. Got a little worse. I was watching. I'm gonna have to address that in the fairly
Uh,
near future. One day I was on the
yeah.
way out to go to work, and I heard this shh. And I said, "What is that?"
Oh
And I look in
no.
there, and water's just spraying from where the
Oh.
leak had finally worn and opened it up more and
Yeah.
more and more.
Oh
So now I just
no.
had water spraying all in that room. And
That's the worst.
ah, walk
There's
out.
nothing good about that.
No, only thing you can do at that point, because I had to go to work, was walk out in the
Shut it.
front yard,
Yep.
pull the cover off the city water supply, shut it off, and
Shut the
I
whole house off and
shut
just
the
say,
whole
forget
house
it.
off. Say I'll address this when I get home.
Oh, jeez. I'm so sorry to hear. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's always the way of it, though, right?
yeah, and I mean it. Yeah, if it had been a day when I could have had time to empty out my garage, that would have been the day. So anyway, sorry,
Definitely.
non-flight
No,
related, but
no. It's
that is, I would love to build one of those Murphy
that's a
workbenches
good
style
idea.
things.
That's a good idea. So I guess if you're listening, I guess we'd love to hear what your bench ideas are or what you use for a bench because everybody's got a little something different. I built a massive, heavy tabletop set, and I also bought something. What is it? Harbor Freight has those wood workbenches. I bought one of those, so the two of them kind of nestle up to be my work surface when I'm not using the dining room table,
Hmm.
which is so far all the time. But it's really heavy. I designed it so that my ex was interested in getting into beadwork. So there's going to be a little furnace and a little thing that you could use a blowtorch, and it had the concrete panel walls on the as a build surface and the backsplash. So I'm looking to kind of set that back up and get a work light in there, and then kind of spruce it up with some stuff. Makes it more like a plate shop. So we'll see. Um, so
I
you,
think where
you
you were, I think where you're going with that was if you have
oh
workbench
yeah, thanks.
ideas or something you want to share.
Yeah, please let us know. You can email us at aviationrcnoob at gmail.com. I
So
know Joe would love to hear all of those ideas, and I'm always curious to see what other people do. I never do what most people do, so I'm always curious how they organize their stuff. Um, let's
and
see.
on that topic, um, we've had two, maybe three people email in after listening, and there weren't questions that were need to be read on air or discussed on air, but I've had a couple people, or we've had a couple people write in,
Okay.
and I've been able to read those emails and respond to them, and that was nice to hear back that somebody who's actually responding and writing in and talking. So that was cool. So
Yeah.
if you've got questions, thoughts, things, feel free to shoot us an email.
Yeah.
It may take a couple days to get to because you know this
Yep.
one we can get to it, but we'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts,
Mhm.
hear your questions.
And I always love hearing what your experiences are at the field. Whenever sometimes it's always some nonsense where some crazy stuff happens. We'd love to hear about it because it's nice to know. That's part of what I like about talking to Joe and going out and talking to the guys at the field or anybody else on the forums and flight test or whatever. Is just hearing the kind of that you're not alone when you just tank your plane 3 times into the dirt nose first, like you'd never learned the first
Hmm.
time. Or, you get to see people's success or like everything's going good until, and something else happens. Yeah.
And
Let's
just
see.
to avoid any problems, if it's something that you don't mind being read or talked about,
Mm,
in the show, you send an
Let us
email,
know.
you got a story that you want to share. If you don't mind us talking about it, write in your email that I don't mind this being discussed on the show, and
Yeah.
you know, we may talk about it while we're sitting here chit chatting to share the story. Just if it doesn't have that, to not have a problem or not to upset anybody, we're not going to bring up anything that on air
Yeah.
that was emailed to us.
Exactly. Just let us know if you want to read it, if you're okay with us reading it on the air. Because if it is one of those stories that you're like, yeah, I think people need to hear about this. It'll maybe help them feel better about when they take a build, and maybe it doesn't go as like they expected. I don't know. Misery loves company, maybe. Um, I know I'm gonna see if I can finish up this Bumble Crow. I'd love to get this hexy flying and the origami plane in the air, and I desperately want to see this Bruce Gosling, all six motors whirring up like crazy and the whole thing moving. So those are what I'll be working on in the next couple weeks. We'll see if we make any progress on it. And I,
Oh,
I would love to see Joe build his simple soar, so that we can watch him soar. Maybe I'll bring mine, and we could just have a good time out in the field next time we meet.
yeah, man, ride those thermals.
Heck yeah, baby. All right. So you can reach us at Facebook at Aviation RC Noob. Drop a line. Tell us what you're thinking. We send out notifications through Twitter. Um, and you can reach, I think we have our podcast is still strong on iTunes. So you can go there and see if you can find us there, or Google Podcast. And we are now moving our stuff over to anchor.fm. So you can find us there as well. You can email us, like we said earlier, at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. And you can also go to the flight test forums at the on and off the field section, and we'll have some posts with for each episode. So whatever one you're listening to, just drop us a line there and tell us what you thought about that individual episode. Eventually, I'd like to see if we can't aggregate them into kind of one little subfolder. But in the meantime, until we get there, just let us know what you're thinking.
And talking about the Anchor FM, um, as we're because we're having to move the podcasting host um, away from our previous because we were limited by it. So go into Anchor.fm. We will hopefully they have an automated distribution system. So either I'll manually distribute the podcast to various platforms, or I'll let them just automatically put it out there. So we're looking at the possibility for Spotify, iTunes, which we're already on, but Google Podcasts, which we're actually not currently on. We're on Google Music. I made
Oh,
that
right.
mistake when I was setting that up. So I got us on Google Music, not Google Podcast.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
there's a couple others that it would automatically uh, update and put our podcast out on. So by the time this episode goes up, one of those two options will be a thing. Either I'll have done it manually, or it'll be done automatically. And shoot, who knows? You might find us on your favored listening platform.
Ooh, very nice. I'm
We'll see.
excited about that. Honestly, that's one of the things I enjoy most. Do you remember, Joe, what we're thinking about talking about next time? 'Cause-
Oh, I don't off the top of my head, and I don't know that we've really discussed. Oh, wait a second. I'm pulling up the show notes. It looks
yeah.
like motors and ESCs.
Okay. And I'm hoping we can bring in an expert on that, because while I can talk about it, there's a lot of technical detail in there. And I've had a couple requests that say, hey, look, man, go as deep as you're willing to go. So if I can get an expert on, we're going to go deep. Otherwise, I'm going to go about as deep as I can safely stomach, because I don't want you guys to be trying a bunch of stuff and burning up all your motors and ESCs going, those aviation RC noobs, they're idiots. I don't need any more of that.
Well, they wouldn't be wrong, but
Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, we're looking to get some friends in, fellow podcasters and people who I think one of the gentlemen actually works as the helpline for one of the ESC makers. So we're going to see if we can have him talk about and share his expertise. And the other guy, if I recall right, it's RC Stuff is the podcast name. We'll see if we can get them on. And the other guy is a world class quad racer. And those guys go through motors and ESCs faster than you can drink water, unless they've got their build right. So
well,
anyway, so we're hoping to get those guys on, and if we can't, we'll maybe talk to them after about some of the details. So stay tuned for learning about motors and ESCs. Thanks for
depending
listening.
on how that episode goes out, like this will be a medium length of average of what we've put out so far. But if that one starts getting deep, we could be looking at a fairly long episode there. So just some heads up on that.
But we have show notes, so we can put in links to, like, somewhere in the middle, or at least, timestamps. So like, hey, if you are tired of hearing us talk about nonsense, just skip to 53 minutes in or something. That's when we talk about the meat and potatoes. So
Yeah,
we'll see if we can help you now.
Now that we've got more characters for our episode description and show notes, we can experiment with different formatting for that area. But that said, Matthew, I think we've reached the end of this one. Any final thoughts before we call it a night?
Just when you fly safe, enjoy it, have a good time. Because if you're not having a good time, you might be doing it wrong.
Fly safe and have fun, guys.
Till next time. Bye.